Yeah. You're listening to Autodesk's Digital Builder Podcast, a show that inspires construction professionals to innovate and use technology to improve how they build our world. I'm Eric Thomas, and I've been working in construction for nearly a decade. And now I have the privilege to sit down with industry trailblazers to hear how they're solving construction's biggest challenges and redefining the future of the built environment. All right, welcome back to Autodesk Digital Builder Podcast. I am your host, Eric Thomas. We are approaching the end of the second day of Autodesk University, not the third. I'm not that fired up yet. We're not wrapping up entirely, but it is the second day of the event. The expo hall is going to close here in the next hour or so. And I have the pleasure of sitting down right now with Mark Dyke, the tenured associate professor and licensed professional counselor from Ferris State University. Mark, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Eric. Thank you for asking. How are things going for you on day two? A lot of podcasts going on.
You know, I'm feeling good. If you're out there listening, you probably hear a little more gravel in my voice. I promise I did not smoke a couple of packs of cigarettes before I walked up on the stage here. It's just a lot of conversations and a lot of enthusiasm, but I'm feeling good. Thank you for asking me. And, today we're going to, have a very important conversation tied to mental health in the construction industry. And there's a lot of nuances here. And I believe the industry is starting to have this conversation more often, which is really meaningful, and I'm appreciative of it. And I'm just grateful that you're, here joining me to, lend a little bit of a perspective to this discussion. And to kick us off today, I was hoping, could you just give me a little bit of your background and give the audience a little bit of context as to why I've, chosen to have you join me today?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. I'm really glad to be here. Very important to talk about this, at AU. Never thought that all the years of attending I'd be able to, be on this podcast. So grateful to be here to talk about this subject. My background is this two-track background. I have a bachelor's in construction management. I've spent, decades, literally 25 years in construction, specifically technology, which has always brought me to AU. But I also had this dual track going on. My master's is in counseling. So I've had these two careers that are now converging together. As mental health awareness is becoming more and more important, I'm finding that I am talking about things in both realms now. So I'm glad to be able to talk about the experience I've had in the industry, the experience not only as a constructor, a construction technologist, but now also as a therapist, as I've been doing for 13 plus years, helping people with mental health issues. So glad to be here and talk about this subject.
I appreciate that baseline so much. And let's be honest, your background is very unique in the construction
some have called
industry.
me a unicorn. So I'm pretty sure I am the only university professor teaching in a construction management program with a degree in construction management and a license in counseling.
Well, I think that's going to give some tremendous value for today's conversation. And I'd like to start to focus on a topic that I think a lot of us who have worked in the industry have probably experienced to some degree. It's a contributor as to why I don't work at a general contractor anymore, if I'm being very candid. And it's focusing on burnout and the impacts that burnout has on the individuals working in the organization and the company that they're actually working for. So can you share a little bit of context on the signs of burnout and what that usually looks like, especially for somebody that's working in the construction industry?
Sure. Signs of burnout are evident. And if we're honest with ourselves, we do recognize when those things are there. And so signs of burnout, meaning we're lacking that drive, that motivation. We're feeling exhausted, tired, almost like I just don't have the energy anymore to go through this. Or what is the point of this, right? Kind of that hopelessness, that helplessness. Those are some of the internal signs. Now, external signs that people will notice in themselves is they start getting late for work. They start being less attentive, and now we start running into safety issues on the job site, right? Where people are not quite as sharp as they used to be, and now we have increased accidents or near misses on the job site. And these are the things we look for, that there might be something going on that might require a little bit of attention, and start paying attention and talking about or seeking help in these areas.
Appreciate that baseline too, because it's not just about the person at that point too. Even though we want to make sure we're really taking care of our people, that should be our paramount focus. But that safety nuance that you've mentioned, that extends far beyond that single individual, and the scope of that can be significant. It really is prudent, at least from my perspective, that our leaders and our managers and our peers are watching and looking out for this, and setting up an environment to ask the questions, are you okay? And if the answer to that question is no, it's okay to say that.
It's okay to not be okay.
Yeah.
Right. And you've identified exactly. We need to put people before paperwork. Right. And in my AU talk, we talk about that, about how this isn't just an individual issue. This is a business issue. Our businesses will not succeed. Buildings will not get built if our people are struggling. And so being able to acknowledge that, to see that, and then for leadership to be vulnerable, to say, hey, you know what? I've struggled with stress. I've struggled with anxiety, panic attacks, right? You and I both standing up here, doing this. I'm sure the first time you did a podcast like this, a little bit of anxiety there, right?
Accurate.
So being able to talk about it and recognize it is the first step that we got to do to really start addressing this.
And that's such a big culture conversation as well. And I've worked at organizations that facilitate and empower those conversations. And I've worked at ones that don't as well. And I think many of us have been in that bid review or have been sitting outside of that conference room, and you've had, multiple grown-ups standing on either side of a conference table screaming at each other. And I understand that the pressures in our industry are incredibly high. The margins are narrow, and when mistakes happen or challenges arise, the stress is considerable from the leadership downward. But when you have your leaders in a room acting like that amongst themselves, even if you don't have some of the individual contributors in that room, that leaks out of that conference room. You don't contain that if other folks can hear what's going on. And I don't think everybody thinks about that sometimes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you hit a key point there, is there is a culture shift happening. I think back to when I started in the construction industry. I'm a carpenter by trade. The yelling, the screaming, the swearing, the way the job site had a culture of its own is totally changing, especially the last several years. We're starting to pay attention a whole lot more to people's well-being. Do they enjoy their work? Because if they don't enjoy their work, they're not going to stay. And if they're working with people that do the things that you were talking about, they're going somewhere else, especially when the economy is good. There's opportunities to go other places.
Oh, yeah.
And so businesses are really starting to pay attention to that culture. And that's one of the things I talk about in my talk, is a culture of care, as opposed to a culture of just get it done, schedule, budget, and stressing people out.
Yeah, if you're too focused on that project delivery, I mean, we have to make sure our owners are happy and everything, but there's a humanity that's mixed into this that we can't miss.
Absolutely.
Even if you decouple the individual care, like if you got somebody who just doesn't care that much, which is unfortunate, but it happens, there's still that business perspective that you've been talking about so far already too, where you go like, this impacts your business, your numbers, your safety, all these things. And so it's all kind of mixed together. But I'd like to talk a little bit more about this burnout topic. And could you share your perspective on what's happening right now that is really driving such a large number of people into that situation of burnout? I don't think it's a new topic in construction, but I'd love to hear just some of those contributing factors. I feel like we've unpacked them a little bit, but if there's anything else that comes to mind.
Construction, the labor shortage is the big issue right now. We have less people, and we got a lot of work that's got to get done. The baby boomers, they're retired, and then there's a few still hanging out teaching, but by and large, that large group of labor is now out of the workforce. So there is more pressure. There's still a lot of projects, and not a lot of people are entering construction. So that is contributing to the stress of the projects. Now add to that, construction lends itself to some very difficult situations. Projects aren't always, 10 minutes from home. They might be in another city, another state. And so you're away from family, you're away from friends, you're away from your support system for long periods of time. Workers don't have control over what's going on with the job because maybe a supplier, something wasn't delivered on time. So now they're stressed about their deadline. People are stressed about the budget. So much that's out of their control contributes to that stress, to that burnout. And you keep doing that day after day, month after month, year after year. People eventually just say, I'm done, I'm out.
There's definitely a buildup there. And it's unfortunate because the folks that work in this industry are so passionate about it. And for good reason. We're doing incredible things. The incredible work is there. And so I'm encouraged, especially as the younger generation starts to take the reins. I feel like that is part of that driver of that changing narrative too, because, folks younger than myself are even more open about sharing how they feel and having those conversations. And it's one of those things that like you see it and you go, okay, like you're onto something here. Like let's keep these conversations moving forward. And I think we can learn from that. And I'd be interested to hear now, what advice would you offer for someone who's out there listening and they see all these things in themselves. You've walked through the signs of burnout.
Yeah.
What should they do at this point?
First step, the very first step is one, to recognize it, to see it, and then have that honest conversation with yourself. All right, I'm burning out. I'm stressed. Because so often it is encouraged to ignore that, to work harder, to push through it. Construction will eat you alive.
Yeah.
The hours, you know this, you've worked, the hours will just destroy you, And so at the university, I tell students, like, look, you got to take care of yourself. So the first thing is recognize it. That's first step. Second, and I tell this to clients and I tell this to students, if nothing changes, nothing changes. So you have to change something. You got to change something about what you're doing, because what you're doing is burning you out. So do you need to get some different exercise? Exercise is great for the body. It's really good for the mind, right? With what goes on. There's a reason why us therapists tell people, just go work out, even take a 5-minute walk does wonders for the human body and the mind. Maybe you need to talk to someone. Maybe you need to change your priorities and change things around a little bit. Because again, if you don't address it, if you don't change it, it's going to continue. And eventually you will get to that part where, okay, now you're done and you just don't want to do this anymore. So go get some help. And then once you do that, monitor your well-being. Check in with yourself once in a while. We have vehicles that we maintain. We give oil changes and tire rotations. Are we doing that with our mind? Are we checking in and saying, how am I doing? How am I feeling career-wise? Am I feeling okay? Am I on the right track? Or am I feeling, this is a dead end, this is going nowhere? Well, then it might be time to make a change.
And you point out such an important skill set that isn't really taught to folks and isn't talked about, I don't think, in the sense of advocating for yourself in that situation, especially for, those that are a bit more junior in their careers and they don't necessarily feel empowered to bring that to the table as far as talking to their manager. And I think the manager's responsibility in the situation is to communicate that they're there to hear this conversation as well. And as you build upon that, I think it puts folks in a better position to open that door and have it. And if you've never told somebody that, it might not even cross their mind that they can come to you and say that, because they might look at it and go, this will impact my ability to get promoted or grow through my career. And hopefully that's not the case. But, I think people have a responsibility to really cement that it is clear that it absolutely isn't the case. And we're here to listen.
Yeah. Us Gen Xers, we've really dropped the ball in this area. We've not addressed this. We've ignored it. We've done what we saw, which was ignore the issues and just work harder. I got to give credit to the millennials. They're willing to talk about this. But then that forces us, and a lot of us are in these leadership positions, management positions, we have to rethink how we interact.
Yeah.
We have to rethink about how are we working with this next generation so that they are comfortable enough to talk about these topics. Again, because if we don't, it's not going to change. We're going to lose them. I tell people that are in management positions, the open door policy, we've all heard about that, but really take an interest in your people. Ask them how they're doing and be sincere about that. Don't just do the, I'm good, how are you? I'm fine, how are you? No, know what's going on. Like, hey, last week you were on this project and you guys were rushing to get this done. How you doing with that? Did you guys get it? Do you need more time? Ask them how they're doing and be sincere. Be a good human, right? This is stuff we've learned in grade school, elementary school, right? Be nice to one another. And it's that easy.
Yep.
But I think in when we're in management positions, we're focused on budget, we're focused on schedule and outcome. And we have to start putting those people first or we will lose them.
Yeah. And I think especially with the younger generation that we're talking about here, they have a lot of options. Even if they're excited about some of the technology choices, the career path in construction, if they see this going on over here, you lose them pretty quick, as you just pointed out. And they have options and they can go somewhere else. And so as we continue to struggle to get these younger folks into this industry to begin with, we have to clean house. We have to do our due diligence here to ensure that the environment and the companies and the organizations we work for are supporting in the way that they expect, and they have high expectations, and they should.
Yeah,
realistically.
And we've heard this for a long time. Why do people leave jobs?
Yeah,
it's not because of the company; it's because of their supervisor.
Oh, absolutely.
Their direct supervisor has the biggest influence. So if those people in those positions can create that environment, make it okay to talk about this, to, hey, I make time for you and I follow up with you on how you're doing, that employee is going to want to stay around a lot longer.
Yeah, I think there's a big impact as we build out these very intentional moves and changes in the way we communicate with their teams. Imagine you're somebody's peer or their manager, and they're watching one of their colleagues or their direct reports or friends or somebody on a different team, whoever this might be, and they see these signs of burnout in that person, and it doesn't seem like they're taking any action to find a path to solve that. What advice would you offer to that peer or that manager to better help them either acknowledge that or find ways to navigate through it?
I tell people, because I do trainings on this in the construction industry, and I tell those in management, look, you don't have to be a therapist, right? You just got to be a good person. So check in with someone when you see those signs and ask them and say, hey, I'm noticing you're coming in late a little bit more. Is everything okay? Don't get on them about being late. Figure out why they're being late, right? They want to know that you care, right? So you start asking those questions. Now, some people may or may not open up. Your job is to open the door. Your job is to provide. And if someone isn't comfortable talking to you as a manager about what's going on in their lives, let them know the resources. One of the most staggering statistics is 46% of people don't seek help because they don't know what's available. So if you can push that narrative that talking about mental health is okay, here's the resources we have at this company. Maybe it's an EAP. We're doing toolbox talks. We've got QR codes that are on the job box. If we change that culture, then that employee knows I have options. But it's the manager's job when they start seeing things to follow through, to ask the question and to offer assistance, because ultimately that's all you can do is say, hey, we care about you and we want to work with you and make sure you're healthy.
I really like that point about, not trying to push them through that door too, because I think that does two things, especially if they're hesitant about it. Is it one, now they're resistant to whatever you're trying to share with them, even if your intentions are good. But two, they very likely feel like there's a punitive conversation that might be following that, or that they're being forced into something. And they're absolutely not going to come to you and tell you how they're feeling in the future if you approach that conversation wrong. And, it's not, I don't say that in the perspective of, hesitate to do it, but everything you just shared in how to do it is so astute, because like you said, it opens the door for them, but it lets them decide if they want to come through it.
We have to let them decide. People have to want to seek help. And when I do counseling, especially couples counseling, I get, a couple on the couch and I look at them and I go, okay, who made the appointment? And then I look at the other one and I say, do you want to be here? Because if you don't, this isn't going to work and we're wasting time, right? If you don't want to get help, you're not going to get help, right? So we have to at least present it to people and let them decide, empower them to make that choice. Because when someone is motivated to do something, then it's going to work.
I appreciate that perspective, and we have a lot of work to do in the regards of how we speak about mental health. And it's unfortunate that there's such a stigma about being open about it, because, mental health is just health. It's just healthcare. Like this is all the same thing. And as a society, we really do need to get better about how we speak about it and how comfortable, because you shouldn't be ashamed if you're depressed. You shouldn't be ashamed if you're uncomfortable about something. But unfortunately, there are social norms and social stigma tied to it that, we're doing the work. We're here doing the work today, and I'm encouraged, like I said earlier, about our younger generation, but there's a lot of work left to do, to say the least.
Yeah, there is a lot of work to be doing. But if we're all honest with each other and be vulnerable for a minute, who doesn't deal with stress, anxiety? Everyone has depression to some degree, anxiety to some degree. Is it crippling, right? When it gets crippling, now we're in a crisis situation. So if everyone just acknowledges, like, you know what, we're all human. We all deal with this stuff. So why don't we help each other out? And then maybe we can push this a little further and push the narrative out a little bit more and really start to help people.
I appreciate that very much, Mark. And, unfortunately, all these challenges, mental health challenges we're talking about, aren't limited to just burnout like we've been talking about so far today. And they extend much further if we look at the data from recent years. I'd appreciate it if you could share your perspective, as a mental health professional and construction technologist, just on the broader state of mental health in the construction industry. Like where are we at? Where are the statistics sitting?
And so as we delve into this, this is a little deeper now, a little more serious, somber, I guess. I always want to tell people, like, just a little heads up, a little warning. Some of the stuff we're about to talk about can be triggering. We're going to talk about pretty severe mental health, suicide, death. And that could be upsetting to people. And It's okay if someone's not comfortable with it. It's okay that if they don't want to listen anymore, if they don't want to be in the room, because odds are we all know somebody that's impacted by this.
Absolutely.
And so being impacted by suicide acknowledges like, okay, this is life and death. And so as we start talking about some of these statistics, I hope people realize it's okay if you're not uncomfortable. It's okay to turn it off, walk away, because we have to talk about this stuff. Ignoring it doesn't help us. What's happening is, I don't know if you're aware of this, but suicide in the construction and extraction industries is the highest of any industry, universal. And I don't matter whether the stats are the US, the UK, Australia, the theme is there. And in fact, if you take all of the deaths in construction due to falls and hits and everything that we categorize, you add those all up, suicide is still 5 times higher than that. But what are we not talking about? Suicide, right? We're talking about OSHA and safety and tie-offs and harnesses, but we're not talking about mental health. At least we weren't. That's now starting to change. So the statistics are very sobering when it comes to people dying by suicide. People dealing with substance abuse issues, alcohol and drugs are taking our people out. So when we talk about a labor shortage that we already have, and now they're going to get taken out by this too, we're dealing with a crisis here.
It's sobering to hear the data points and the seriousness of this situation. And I really hope that somebody out there listening hears this and understands that there are resources available. As you so pointed out, the statistics, even just around safety, not talking about suicide, everybody who's worked in the construction industry knows somebody who's been injured, has had an incident that has impacted them or somebody they care about. That's, if you work in this industry for a while, something's going to happen. And I just really want to point out the fact that the data you just shared and this delta, when you add all of that up, it just really hammers home how important it is for us to check in on our people, to make sure we're having these conversations and also sharing all of those resources that you were talking about. I'd like to go a little bit deeper here. Can you talk a little bit more about what kind of outcomes are we expecting here if this continues? What's the slippery slope that we're sitting in right now if we don't tackle this situation?
It's not good, Eric. It's not going to get any better. It's going to get worse. If we don't address this, those suicide rates are going up. You talk about the people impacted. Right now, the number sits at 131. Every suicide impacts 131 different people in some way, shape, or form. As we talk about this topic, if we want these numbers to come down, we've got to bring awareness. We've got to address this issue. We're going to lose more people. More projects are not getting done. Our economies will suffer. People will suffer. And statistics are sobering, but I don't want to lose sight of these are people.
Yes.
Like when we start talking numbers and I throw out, there's a number out there, I think it's 52 or 53 per 100,000 is the rate of suicides in construction. Those are people. That's someone's mother, brother, father, sister, right? These are lives. And so if we want to change this, we've got to talk about this, because if we don't, to your question, if we don't, it's just going to get worse. It's going to continue and it's going to get worse.
And as you look at where the state of the industry is right now, if we don't continue to correct this perception challenge that we're having, and in this environment that some folks are aware of before they get into construction, as far as the stress and the tension and such, the labor shortage obviously isn't getting any better. And these constraints are going to continue to increase. The pressure is going to increase. The ability to meet our schedules is going to increase. And so if we're not setting up these safety nets that we're talking about here and having these conversations, as you just pointed out, it carries on. I'm thankful that we're having this conversation to point this out so bluntly, because it's important, but it's also one of those things that we get to build on.
Yes.
And so I'd like to shift a little bit now. And what guidance would you offer to organizations who are really looking to start changing the culture of their teams? And, maybe they're experiencing high levels of employee burnout, especially with all these deadlines. Even if they're not experiencing all these burnout statistics and they don't have these programs and they're not talking about it, they still should be, of course. So where should folks start?
Good business owners know that if we don't invest in our people, we're losing our business pretty quick. So I encourage business owners, invest in your people. Normalize talking about mental health. We talk about safety. We talk about, stretching exercises before the job every day. What about some mental health exercises, checking in? I encourage those business owners to start the discussions, have the conversations, because the more we start talking about this, like you and I are right now, it normalizes the discussion, right? There's this taboo in the past, at least for you and I growing up, that we don't talk about this stuff because, well, mental health issues means that you're crazy or you're sick, but that's not, that's not true, right? It means you're human, and sometimes we need help, and sometimes we need a little bit of assistance. So if people and businesses can start to have those conversations, and we call it normalizing talks about mental health, that's how we start this. That's how we do this. That's how we start to turn the tide and to start to change these statistics, which I believe will change because there is a movement. There's a movement nationally and globally to start addressing this finally.
And it's great to see more and more people talking about this. And I wish more folks had more visibility on the resources that are available to them. Like, I've been privileged in the past to, take advantage of therapy resources that have been offered to me. And I remember before I went the first time, I was really nervous about that. It was like, I don't know what to expect. Somebody's going to lay me down on a couch and say, tell me all your things. Like, that's not really accurate. No. And what I realized is I've gone through that, and I've seen a number of therapists over the years of my life. I'm talking about myself in a very open way right now, but
that's what, that's how we change it.
It is.
It's that vulnerability that then invites others to go, oh, okay, Eric has seen a therapist. I guess that's not a bad thing.
It's not. And you know what? I'll tell you what, being able to go and see those therapists and have those conversations, the return on that for me personally and professionally has been tremendous, because you have this unbiased person who is, you get a contract or however you want to call it, as far as you're being in therapy, and you get to share your challenges, and they're going to offer this advice that's not clouded by being your friend, or clouded by being your mother, or clouded by being your manager or your peer. And the clarity that you get to have in that conversation, and also have somebody call you on your bullshit if
accountability,
if you're pushing it.
I do that a lot with my clients.
Is tremendous, because it's different when it's not your friend. It's different when it's not your manager, and it's just a really valuable resource to have.
It's a great relationship. And I tell clients that as a therapist, like, look, I'm going to walk alongside you. I'm going to walk along with you, and we're going to go through this together. You're not alone. They're conversations. You're absolutely right. They're conversations where we help people explore what they want, right? What are your goals? What do you want to get out of this? It's not about what I want as a therapist. It's what you want as a client. And you're right. I have no bias towards anything. I'm not your manager. I'm not your family member. It's what can I do to help you reach your goals?
Yep. And you have awareness of resources that the individual don't have, which actually leads into my next question. Could you walk through some of those resources that are available to folks? So like, if you're out there, somebody that's out there listening, like, please listen to what Mark's about to share, because there's help. So
the number one that we share is the number, if you are in crisis or suicidation, 988. 988 is the National Suicide Crisis Hotline. You call that number, you will talk with a professional who will help you through that moment, right? So that's the first thing we give out. In construction specifically, we have the Construction Industry Alliance for Suicide Prevention. They've got some great resources on their website as well. And then I encourage people, the third one is, go find a therapist. Talk with someone and find one that fits. I don't know what your experience was like, but I tell clients, look, I'm pretty blunt with my clients. Some of them really appreciate that. Find a therapist that you connect with, because if you don't connect with your therapist, it's not going to work, right? No. So feel free. And I tell my clients, if I'm not a fit, go find someone else. Like, I'm not offended, because I want you to get the help you need, right?
And if you were offended, it'd be a good sign to know that you should probably go see a different therapist.
Then I need to go see someone else. So go start talking to someone. It doesn't mean, again, it doesn't mean you're messed up. It doesn't mean, it's just, you know what? I want to talk to someone who's unbiased, who's going to listen to me. And for a lot of clients, honestly, Eric, they need to come in and just kind of process through what they're thinking. Here's some objective questions coming at them, holding them accountable as well. And then they feel like, all right, now I know what I'm going to do, right? A lot of times I don't tell clients what to do. And my general rule is I don't give advice, because who am I to tell you how to live your life, right? Yeah. I don't live in your house. I don't know what your work is like. I'll throw ideas at you, but ultimately it is your decision on what you want to do. So find someone to talk to, find a therapist.
And it makes a lot of sense. And I appreciate you also sharing that perspective as far as, how you're going through encouraging somebody too, because I think people think sometimes they might go in and, you're laying on the couch and doing the thing that you see in the
Yeah.
movies. And then you go, okay, here's your prescription for your thing. And this is exactly
Yeah.
what you do. And away you go. And there's variations of that,
Yeah.
but you get to kind of tailor your journey based on the therapist you choose and what
Yeah.
you're comfortable doing. I agree with you there. I encourage everybody to, step out. And if you feel like you need to talk to somebody, those resources are most certainly
Absolutely.
available. On a more positive note here, as we've been talking about a bit, I'm just incredibly encouraged that the narrative on this conversation is starting to shift. That stigma that we've seen is starting to hopefully get pushed away. And, not everybody will ever dance in, the space
Yeah.
we'd love them to be in. And that's okay. It's unfortunate, but it's just the reality of circumstances. But I'm just seeing more and more conversations.
Yeah.
I'm seeing more organizations come up. I'm seeing more transparency in the statistics and the data and also the why behind that. Right now, I'm curious, what else has you optimistic? What are you, bullish about regarding the narrative in mental health in the construction industry?
Talking about it is working. We're seeing a national and international push now to address this issue. So I believe we are at the beginning of changing the tide. I think that those numbers are going to get better, not worse, if we continue what we've started within the last several years. Last several years have brought about some challenges, and people have been aware of mental health. So the fact that I'm at AU, right? I'm a tech geek. I'm a computer guy when I teach construction to students, and I'm talking about mental health.
Yeah.
Right. The fact that you're having me on this podcast gives me hope for it's working. It's getting attention, right? People see this and go, hey, wait a minute. I want to learn about this. The response from students at the university has been tremendous. My own counseling business, I'm getting more and more requests now for corporate training to come in and, hey, can you talk to us about stress and burnout? Can you talk to us about conflict resolution? People are starting to pay attention. So as sad and sobering as those statistics are from earlier, I'm starting to see personally a lot of traction headed in the right direction, which means this is working. And I know it's working. I mean, just last month, I met someone who works for a company that I did some training for this summer. And it was at a career fair. She pulled me aside. She says, hey, I got to talk to you a minute. I'm like, oh, okay. Serious conversation.
Yeah.
She goes, you did that training with us this summer. And I need to let you know that the following week, a young man came into our office from our field and said, I need help. She goes, he was in your sessions. She goes, he wouldn't have done that otherwise because he was a quiet person. And that gave me goosebumps. It gave me chills that
I'm feeling that way right now.
That's like, it's working.
Yeah.
Right. This person decided to speak up and seek help, and he's getting the help he needs, I believe, all because we're talking about it. Because that company said, we think that's important. We want you to come in and talk about that for a day.
Yeah.
So it's absolutely starting to change things, and it's saving lives. And if it changes one person, if one person listens to this podcast that you decided to host here and they go, I want to seek help, totally worth it.
I'd agree with you.
I
entirely
absolutely
on that.
would. I will fly to wherever to talk about it and have these conversations.
Yeah. I think we're driving that narrative forward. I'm appreciative of the work that you're doing and the transparency that you're offering this very important, sometimes uncomfortable conversation to drive forward, but you're handling it in a really great way. And as I had mentioned at the beginning of this, just your unique background with construction technology, plus the, licensed therapist and everything, it all comes together. It feels good in a way that where you're talking about something that's, very stressful. And so, I appreciate that. And I've got two final questions for you. And I'm going to lean on the technology part too, because I know you are
a tech geek.
Yeah, you are a tech geek. And so I want to give you an opportunity to, share a little bit about that, considering, the excitement of AU. So, what are your current favorite industry trends you're seeing right now? And could you share some predictions for what you think is going to come in the next 5 to 10 years for construction?
The coolest trends, I mean, AI is huge, right? AI, everyone's talking about it. They're talking about it at AU. AI does some really cool stuff. And as a university professor, sometimes that stuff is students using it to write their papers, which isn't necessarily good. But we can use AI as well as instructors, so they got to watch out for that.
Yeah, we gotcha.
Yeah, we're taking care of that. But data collection, I teach about robotics and drones and laser scans, and I have for a long. The way we're now collecting data and analyzing data, I'm again a computer geek, data geek. Love seeing what we're doing because now we're able to predict and control and produce better outcomes because we're getting smarter about this. We have to. There's less people in the industry. We have no choice, right? So I'm pretty geeked out about that stuff. I often say I pick the worst subjects to teach at the university because I have to rewrite my content all the time. 2 + 2 is still 4. Estimating is still estimating, right? But technology is always evolving. So I'm really kind of excited. And I come to AU and I see the stuff we have here. And I get totally geeked out about like, oh, this is going. I come back to my students and I say, here's, you got to see this stuff. This stuff's really sweet. The other thing is on the mental health side, seeing worker well-being a focus has got me excited about what holds the future for this industry and the next generation. I often say, look, my generation, we failed. We did not do a good job at this. So guess what? We're going to teach you guys how to do this right and to be well taken care of so you guys have good quality of life, which results in better projects, Eric. It just does, right? When people are happy and enjoy their work, their outcome, their production, everything is better. And as society as a whole, our communities, we need that. We really do need that.
And I think the technology piece that you started on, that maps directly back to the mental health conversation that we've been having too, because as we're able to improve the workflows we're doing and reduce, wasteful tasks or time-consuming tasks, that reduces that burden on our folks. They get to go home at 5:30. They don't go home at 8 p.m. anymore. And so all of these things do play their part. Obviously, we have to be, messaging this conversation right on the nose. I wouldn't say you step in and go, well, we're going to bring AI in and it's going to help our mental health issue. But it does have a role. It does play a part. And I'm just thankful about all of that. So one final question for you today, sir. What is one tool that you will always use on every project you work on?
It's going to be empathy and communication, because that is so critical. And we heard about it earlier today. If you saw that general session, as a therapist, that is the key. As Ryan Reynolds was talking about that, the therapist side of me was getting all geeked out going, yes, talk about this. Because people, when we have empathy in communication, we understand. We might not agree, but we understand and we can solve problems, right? A lot of what we do in construction is solving problems, putting out fires, issues arise, things change. And if we can have empathy in our communication, we can solve those a lot quicker and not struggle with personalities and pissing people off and, making enemies and stuff, but rather that team that works together towards a common goal. So empathy and communication would be my tool that I always use. I know it's not a tape measure or hammer, but that is a tool that, man, if I could teach that to everybody, all my students, all my clients, I think we'd be much better off. So,
it really fits. And like I mentioned earlier, I've been on the teams that exhibit all of these, qualities, and I've been on teams that don't so much. And I think the feedback loop that we're in is that empathy, when you're in a conflict at work, generally the other person doesn't necessarily have bad intentions when they're coming in, but it's very easy to be like, whoa, what is wrong with this person? How dare they?
Yeah.
And we're all people. Yeah. Everybody's just trying to do their work. We're all dealing with stuff outside of work, and it's easy to lose sight of that sometimes.
Yeah.
And so I guess my encouragement would be if, you're on Slack or you're, on a video call with somebody and somebody says something, are they really trying to poke their finger in your eye?
Right.
Maybe, but probably not.
Right.
So there's a bit to unpack there, I think. And I feel like we can all bring that to our projects and our work every day. So,
absolutely.
Mark, it's been an absolute pleasure sitting down with you today. Thank you so much for sharing your experience and perspective about such a, important topic, especially one that I am just appreciative that, you can help us lift up and show people both what's going on, but I think more importantly, what we can do and the resources that are available. We'll reach out when this episode comes out because I'd like to take and put some of the links and some of the information that you shared into the show notes to make sure that somebody who is listening has really easy access to all of that information. So make sure you check that out if anything here is intriguing and you're a listener. But beyond that, of course, everybody out there listening, I am your host, Eric Thomas. This is another episode of Autodesk Digital Builder Podcast. If you are standing and staring at me right now here in the Autodesk Expo Hall, all of these episodes are available on the Autodesk Construction Cloud YouTube channel. We're a video-first podcast, but we're also, of course, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere you get your podcasts. But until next time, goodbye.